First, let's look at the Preferences menu. Here we've got Default Machine folder. This is where your virtual machine files are stored by default. If you've got a really small boot drive and you don't have a lot of free space on it, you could use a different drive. The next useful setting would be to check for updates. Oracle releases updates for VirtualBox maybe every few months or so, so it's a good idea to stay up to date on bug fixes and features if you can. So enable this setting, maybe have it checked once per month. The last one would be the theme, so if you prefer a dark theme or a light theme, choose the one you like. The Oracle VirtualBox extension pack adds support for Remote Desktop Protocol in VirtualBox, disk encryption, NVMe support, and Pixie booting. To download this one, just click on the link here, all supported platforms, and click on the VBox file. Click on install and accept the license agreement. And now that appears under the extensions menu. Okay, now let's have a look at the media tool. This is where you can create virtual hard disks. To create one, just click on create. Now there's 3 different formats we could use for the disk. I'd recommend VDI if you're only using Oracle VirtualBox. This would be the most compatible format, but only for Oracle VirtualBox. If you need to use another hypervisor, you can use these other 2. Let's just go with VDI. We can pre-allocate the full size. This means the space is reserved on the physical hard disk. Otherwise, it will just dynamically allocate the space as we put more data on that virtual hard disk. The next page is where we want to save it and what name we want to choose for it. Then we also choose the size in gigabytes, so it depends what you're using this for. Let's just go with 20 gigabytes for this one, and then that's done. But we're not using it just yet. It needs to be attached to a virtual machine. So to attach it, go into the settings of the virtual machine that you want to attach it to. Go to storage. Click on this plus icon here to add a hard disk. Select the hard disk. Click on choose. And now it's in there. It'll just need to be formatted in Windows, in the guest operating system. But that's it. Oh, and there's also the ability to create virtual optical disks and virtual floppy disks. This could be useful if you want to transfer files between the host and the guest, but there's other ways and better ways of doing that anyway, so I won't show you how to do that, but yeah, that functionality is there. Virtual machines can be cloned. This is useful if you want to create multiple machines of the same operating system. It'll save you some time. Or if you just want to create a backup of a virtual machine. To create a clone, right click on the virtual machine, click on clone. You can choose a name and where it's stored. I'd recommend changing this setting here to generate new MAC addresses. That's just to avoid any conflicts that might occur on the network. And then click on next. Less than 10 minutes later, and we now have a clone of the same virtual machine. There's just a few settings I'd like to go through in the virtual machine settings. The first one is nested paging. We can find nested paging under System and then acceleration. Nested paging should be on if you've got an Intel processor that supports VTX with extended page tables, or if you're using an AMD processor, the feature would be called AMD V. I've got an Intel 4790K, and if you just look up your CPU model, you'll find if the feature is present. So here I've got Intel VTX on my CPU, so I would recommend enabling this option for the best performance. The next one is processor. You can enable PAE NX, but only if you've got a 32-bit guest operating system. Right, so the operating system that you install on the virtual machine, if that's a 32-bit operating system, then you should enable this feature. That will allow you to address more memory in the virtual machine. And finally, we've got the ability to enable 3D acceleration to get a bit more graphics horsepower. You'll also be able to choose some more memory. I'll just have to save this first and then come back. What? It's still at 128. Oh, I think that's because I haven't enabled, I haven't installed guest editions. So do install guest editions first. Then you should be able to select up to 256 megabytes of memory. I have seen some weird issues with this feature though. So I have seen graphics glitches in the Windows 11 user interface, things like translucent menus. I would only enable this option if you really require it. If you don't need it, then just switch it off. Another thing we can do in VirtualBox is we can encrypt hard drives. So to encrypt a virtual hard drive for a virtual machine, you have to go into the virtual machine settings. In this general section, go to the disk encryption tab, enable disk encryption. There's two different encryption types here. We've just got 256-bit and 128-bit. The 256-bit would be stronger, so I suppose they both would be strong enough realistically to protect your data. Just make sure you've got a secure password on it. Then click OK, and it's going to encrypt the hard drive. Now when you install a virtual machine that's encrypted, you'll have to put in the password. So if you put in the wrong password, won't be able to start it up. But with the right password, it boots up. In VirtualBox, we can do a video recording of a virtual machine. To start the recording, go to View, and then click on Recording. And we can see down along the bottom here that it's recording. Then we can just stop the recording when we're finished in the same spot. We can also change the settings of the recording, so things like the quality or the size can be affected depending on the settings that we choose here in Display, Recording, and you can choose some settings in here. I'm going to show you now how to create a shared folder. This is a really useful feature to share folders between the guest virtual machine and the host machine. So to set it up, we'll go to Settings of the virtual machine, Shared Folders, add a new shared folder. The folder path will be a folder on the host machine where you want to store files. I've just got a folder on my desktop that I'll use. Okay, then that's really all the settings that we need for this to work. You can change the name if you like. I'll just leave it as it is. Then OK to save it. Now to access the shared folder here, I'm just going to open File Explorer. Then we want to type in to the address bar 2 backslashes, followed by VBox, SVR. Then as soon as I put another backslash in, it's going to bring up the shares that it can see. So there's my share. And there's a file that I've created in there. There's another way to share files between the host and the guest, and that's by using the file manager here. You'll find the file manager for your virtual machine just under its menu here. You'll need to make sure that Guest Editions is installed on the virtual machine. Guest Editions is also required for the feature I mentioned before, shared folders. We'll need to log into the virtual machine here by typing in a user account on that virtual machine guest operating system. Then it's basically logging into the virtual machine when we click on Open Session here. Now we can browse the storage of the virtual machine and we can drag and drop files here. Or actually, you'll have to click on the button here to send them. The last feature I want to show you is snapshots. You can find snapshots here under the virtual machine menu. Snapshots allows us to literally copy the virtual machine at that point in time so that we can restore it later on. This is useful if we make a mistake in our virtual machine configuration. We can simply restore it back to a previous point in time. And you can have as many snapshots as you want. To take a snapshot, just click on Take Snapshot. You can give it a name and a description. Now it's taking that snapshot. There's no need to shut down the virtual machine either. I just did this while it was running. Now I've got a snapshot. So if I make a mistake in my virtual machine, I can simply restore it. Looks like we will have to turn off the virtual machine to restore it. Makes sense. Okay, so just right click on the snapshot, then click on Restore. You can have the option to create a snapshot of the current machine state, just in case. Now it's restoring. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.